West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Julia, let me begin with you and your reporting on what you saw on Russian television. How much of a change is this? Were some of these pundits the people who were saying before the war started that Russia could do this in 3 days?
At least one of them was Bagdasarov, one of the experts that spoke out in favor of ending the conflict, the sooner the better. So it was a very radical change either way, and they're taking quite a risk speaking out that way.
Michael, you served as the sort of punching bag of some of these pundits on Russian television, there to give the view that they could then try to knock down. And you know some of them. What do you make of what they were saying last night?
So I was the punching bag, but I also punched back. And people like me are the people who have disappeared from these shows over the past few weeks. So 3 weeks ago, I could have gone on and said exactly what Karen said, and I would have been yelled at for it, but I would have been able to say it. The fact that it's a big deal that someone is able to say it for 30 seconds on Russian TV now shows just how much things have changed. They are really nervous about controlling this message, and so they are really clamping down on anybody saying anything that doesn't fit the party line.
And Molly, what are you finding? You just left Moscow recently. I'm sorry. You were in Moscow on a journalistic program, working in Moscow, just kind of getting started. Had your hopes of spending a year there. Had to leave very quickly. What are you hearing about what's happening now in the control of information there?
So it's been interesting because at first when things broke out, there was a fairly free flow of information. Obviously, there was Russian state control over things like the television channels. But recently, I've had people even messaging me on Instagram who I know are opposed to the war efforts, who are seeing me post things like the New York Times reporting on the bombing of the maternity hospital in Mariupol, and they're saying, I heard that this was fake news. I think that the landscape has absolutely changed. You're seeing former independent news outlets like the Echo of Moscow and Doj being shut down. You see other independent news stations pulling their reporters out of Russia. It's becoming harder and harder to get good information about the conflict in Ukraine right now.
And Molly, what did you find about how the protests are organized, or whether they're generated spontaneously now that there isn't a real leadership structure for protests?
Yeah, both protesters I talked to and people who were involved in helping those protesters once they had been detained are saying that what's happening is really unique. I think some people would be surprised to hear that these are some of the most arrests, indicating that these are some of the biggest protests that have happened in Russia. Because if you see the images, they don't look nearly as large as the protests for Navalny about a year ago or the protests in Bolotnaya Square in 2011. These are spontaneous, these are decentralized, these are being organized over Telegram channels, and people are having to come up with techniques to basically evade the crackdown on the right to assembly in Russia.
And Michael, what do you make of what those Russian pundits were saying last night, and the fact that they weren't? It doesn't sound like they were doing the cheerleading in the way that Vladimir Putin would want.
So my expectation is that those pundits who were not doing the cheerleading the way Vladimir Putin would want will not be invited back on those shows. Like I said, 3 weeks ago, I would get invitations to go on shows like that essentially every day. People like me have been excluded for a reason. I see a lot of people still on these shows who I know, and I know why they're there. They have completely eliminated anybody who dissents, and I think that Karen Chaknazarov, who dissented just a little bit, will soon disappear from TV screens in Russia.
And Julia, what is your assessment of where the propaganda wall is now? Is it stronger than it was before this war started in Ukraine? Are there cracks in it? What is happening to it?
The propaganda wall is higher than ever, but I think it will cause the opposite effect, because people will start wondering why things have changed so drastically, not only in terms of the economic downfall Russia is facing, but also why all of a sudden all of these alternative sources are not available. And having grown up in the Soviet Union, I know things like that made us wonder more about what they were hiding. So I think that will be the actual effect of what Putin will achieve, exactly the opposite from what he's trying to accomplish.
But Julia, when they're getting this one-note story, what can they do to find other information now?
They still have access to the internet, and they could do what other brave Russians are doing, and that is risking their lives and their freedom to protest. And with time, there will be more of them to make a difference. And for now, they still have a way to find that information, and there are outlets that are continuing to broadcast in Russian in spite of facing fines and penalties and bans, and I think it will make a paramount difference.
Molly, what did you discover in your reporting about how people are communicating and how they're getting information despite the propaganda wall?
People are very active on Telegram channels. They're sharing news with each other. A lot of times they'll start up a private channel so that it doesn't get subject to censorship. And then if that one's infiltrated by the authorities, they'll shut that one down and start a new one. This is very spontaneous and kind of happening person to person. And people are still also using VPNs, even though there's been attempts to shut those down. Some are still working, and so people will use VPNs to access things like Twitter and Facebook that the authorities have restricted access to.
Michael, we saw President Zelensky today, once again, in a statement, do it twice. And the second version was in Russian, and he was directing it directly to Russian troops and the Russian people about these attacks on a hospital, for example. How much of that will get through?
A very minimal amount. The people who Molly's describing, who are following Telegram and who are following alternative sources using a VPN, they will see it. The problem is they're a small minority. Some of them will go out on the streets. It won't be enough. Some of them will emigrate. It will be detrimental to the Russian economy. But this situation in which the Kremlin essentially completely controls propaganda, essentially completely controls information, can continue for years. I agree that it is an unstable system. Up until now, they at least had the illusion of free speech. That illusion is gone. But they can maintain this for longer than you would expect they will be able to.
Julia Davis, what about word of mouth? What about the person who is, using the sources that Molly talks about, but then tells other people who don't have access to that? That must be a difficult discussion, because it'd be kind of hard to prove to that person that President Zelensky said this, or that, what the real truth is.
It is very difficult, but I think that when they realize the magnitude of what has changed in their society and in their life, they will realize that that comports with the magnitude of what Putin has done, and they're on this sinking ship with him. And I believe that it's only a matter of time before they start understanding that the propaganda is only that, and start realizing the reality, the ugly reality of Putin's war in Ukraine. Interpersonal communication will mean a lot, especially since Russia and Ukraine have so many links, and they will break through.
It is Friday, the 11th of March of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Yes, my friends, it's a liquid diet today. Yes. We are in a war, and we're all at Rick's right now, so that makes us all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Yes. Hey, how are you? It is Friday, so Blue Moon Spirits Fridays at that. And that means only one thing: we have a weekend ahead of us. And who knows what's going to happen this weekend? Jeez. I like how Vlad goes, don't worry about the nukes. We got biological weapons. Oh, thanks. Thanks for letting us know, as if we didn't already know. But you're going to, rattle that saber and blame it on Ukraine. I like it. And apparently there's a lot of people on the extreme far right, which is about 73 million. You know, the Republican Party, who pretty much believe whatever Vlad says. And then I also love all of these anti-Ukrainians who said Ukraine is one of the most corrupt people or countries in the world, and Zelensky is one of the most corrupt people in the whole world outside of Soros. You know, two Jewish guys, the most corrupt. That's how they think. Now they want to go and fight in Ukraine. They want to F up some Russians. What? I don't understand. Johnny come lately. And I don't want to F up some Russians. I hate the idea of war. I hate the idea of killing. I wish there was a way that we could stop all of it without all of this. But, Vladimir Putin did attack. And like any, fake news progenitor, he's going to try to convince people that it's not really happening what's happening right before our eyes. It was Ukraine that attacked him. It was the Nazis that he has to save the world from. What? You're the Nazi? And by Nazi, I mean a white nationalist. Okay? Because that's exactly what Vlad is. And his Rasputin Alexander Dugin, these guys might have just written the protocols of the Elders of Zion themselves. I don't know. They certainly have it at their bedstand. Yeah, we're going to denazify Ukraine by killing the Jewish leader of the country. All right. This is a long-standing conspiracy theory. It's why you have pogroms in that part of the world for every 70 years, maybe. The Jews bring it on themselves. In the end is what the argument is. Okay, we have to save the world from the Jews because we got to save those Jews from the Nazis? What? I just love it. Well, I know it's a misappropriated quote to Goebbels, but, blame your enemy for what you're doing. And Zelensky made that very clear because, as my academic mentor, Dmitry Dimitryshin at Portland State said, if you want to know what the strategy of the Russians are, listen to what they're complaining about other people doing. biological weapons, yeah, Vlad's going to use them when he gets a chance. Nukes, scary, isn't it? All of it's scary. Why? Why now? I keep asking that question. Why now? I thought it was the age of Aquarius. Where'd we go into? The house of the bull? Yeah, speaking of bull, in the house of Taurus. Looks like Deutsche Bank is not going to drop Russia as a client. They basically said it would it wouldn't really be good business for us right now. Which means a lot of things, because Deutsche Bank has been repeatedly sanctioned for laundering money for Russia. So it means many things. Somebody's woken up with a horse's head, a bloodied horse's head at the foot of their bed. Or worse. You better toe the Putin line. And what's up with like Cawthorn and Rubio and all of those? Just word for word aping the Russian propaganda line. Oh, I forgot. The NRA was infiltrated by Russian spies, and then the NRA doled out money from Russia to the Republican Party because they couldn't find any Democrats that would have wanted to pretty much overthrow the United States of America for a few coins. All right. And they say that we hippies are unable to govern because we're hippies. We're kids. We're not adults. Oh, bite me. All right. You know, in Mad Max, and I know that now that we all know about Mel Gibson and his predilections for bigotry, racism, and anti-Semitism, I don't know. But anyway, in Mad Max, the neo-romantics were represented by the white-clad, the white-clad people, hippie types, lovey-dovey types at the oil refinery. Okay. Yep. Even they knew that you had to have a few arms on your hip and, I don't know, long rifles or whatever to drive that bus to paradise. Which is, I don't know, why is paradise a beach? I mean, wouldn't you want to go to a lake where you can actually drink the water maybe after you boiled it? I mean, it's a little bit harder to desalinate all that ocean water. Why is paradise a beach? Okay, well, when watching the movies, you have to suspend belief for a bit to enjoy it. Which makes this war in Ukraine not anything like a video game or even a great Australian movie from the 70s. Not even. Okay. And now we're going to have Lincoln Brigades. I'm too old for it. I've been told that I should go. If I'm just going to sit here and complain, why don't I just go? Well, I've went before. No decent military would have me, so I just work for NGOs instead. In war zones or, pretty violent zones. Being threatened by, well, pretty much right-wing death squads with fixed bayonets on their long guns. Yeah, You ain't seeing that when you're laying on a beach in your Speedos. You feel very vulnerable. Very. Speaking of vulnerable, I keep thinking of all of those moms and kids that are trekking almost 1,000 miles in some cases to get to a border so they can escape this Russian onslaught. I mean, one of the largest mass exoduses, I guess that's a word, in history. Certainly the only one that would come to mind would be the mass exodus from or during World War II, which it has been compared to. Now, I don't want to belittle that because it is tragic, but we seem to have not given the same sort of empathetic consideration to those moms and kids trekking over 1,000 miles in many cases in a caravan from South America to make it to the U.S. border to seek asylum from war zones, invading armies, etc. So, I mean, imagine if all of these Ukrainian moms and grandmas and kids came to our border. Would we separate them at the border? Throw the kids in icebox baby gulags to die of exposure and the flu? Let the moms languish in dog cages, dog kennel type, holding huts. What am I talking about? Cells. Would we do that? Because we certainly did it to all those moms and kids that came up from South America, Central America, and Mexico, through Mexico. In fact, on Fox, they were called the invading army. The refugees. The moms and the kids escaping a war zone. Think of the Syrians. I mean, there are boatloads of Syrians drowning in the Mediterranean as we speak because navies are keeping them in the middle of the Mediterranean so they won't land. What's the difference? Is it the color of hair? The color of the eye? How much melanin or lack thereof of the skin? Is that the deciding factor? I guess so. I don't know. If anything good comes of that, maybe people can be a bit more empathetic to the brown skin moms and kids escaping war zones. Maybe. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here on this fabulous Blue Moon Spirits Friday as we end the week and begin the weekend? Begin the weekend. Wow, okay. Well, at the top, some pundits on Russian state TV called for Putin to end the war as harsh sanctions and growing protests destabilize life in Russia. Now, I was wondering, not only will you not see those pundits on state TV anymore, will they be in a gulag for 15 years? I bet they do. I bet that's exactly where they're going, and they'll probably get tortured too. On the rest of the menu, Senate Republicans are pretending gas prices did not start rising under Trump. Yeah, they're good at pretending lies are the truth, aren't they? South Dakota lawmakers struck a deal to defy Kristi Noem to pass the state's $5.8 billion budget. You have to do that when you have an autocrat now in a representative democracy. And the IRS plans to hire 10,000 new workers to relieve a massive backlog. And I don't think it's a massive backlog of mega-rich people's audits. I don't think it is. It would be nice if they cleared those up. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the mayor of a troubled Mexican town was shot dead just weeks after the army's arrival to restore order. And a far-right party will hold a share of power in Spain for the first time since the dictatorship of Francisco Franco. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across from the chat room link to the left, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, I know that everybody's heard this before who have listened to this show, but I feel compelled to repeat it. I don't know why. It's right here in the script, probably. But if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it does truly help us pay our bills and all the other attendant expenses that are pretty much a fixed cost in keeping this powerhouse of resistance resisting the dark forces arrayed against the United States of America and representative democracy worldwide. So if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, and if you could afford to send those funds our way, we have a lot of experience in stretching those dollars beyond compare and paying those bills and the attendant costs. And that lets us fly under the radar and continue resisting those dark forces arrayed against the United States of America and, dare I say, representative democracy itself worldwide. Thank you for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended, oh, so many years ago. Many. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. You just go to @NetrootsRadio. How simple is that? Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. Follow me on Twitter @Justice Putnam. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. One of the reasons why is that I post the show notes and links diary. It will always be a diary. You can try to change it to a story, but it's going to be a diary. But I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. And then I really try to get that posted up on social media in that interim on places like Twitter. And I do that at Justice Putnam. And then it gets out on other social media platforms too. The show notes and links, of course, are where the real reportage can be found. I mean, I'm making fun. But, I'm just giving you kind of like an open door. And so you're going to be outraged even more. Okay? What a job. Okay, so if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, it is so simple. Is it? Go to @CookbookWest and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. And, of course, the deep archive of the Netroots Radio Library can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Okay. Oh, you know what? I wanted to make mention at the top, and I forgot because of the international news. And, I did touch upon some domestic issues. But it looks like we might have caravans of women leaving Missouri to seek medical care, but they're going to be stopped at the border and probably shot. Maybe. The Republicans in Missouri have passed a bill that if you have an ectopic pregnancy, you can't have an abortion, which is a death sentence. Do these ghouls think that these women are witches and an ectopic pregnancy is some sort of punishment God has bestowed upon them for some transgression against his might? And so therefore they need to be punished with the ultimate punishment, and that is the big D. What the hell? I would think women in Missouri and other states who are attempting this need federal help. Maybe a no-fly zone would be in order. Okay. Also, a no-fly zone, just as, to carry on that, doesn't have to be shooting planes out of the sky. We could buzz them. Yeah. Like that wouldn't start World War III. These guys are on edge. They want it. And I don't know why. Oh, I do know why. Everybody thinks that they can survive the disaster. All right. Well, enough of that. I just wanted to make mention that There's a right-wing takeover in the whole wide world. And here it is in America. Okay, it can happen here. So much for the muckrakers. Let's get into this first offering. Speaking of muckrakers, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it comes out of the American Independent by Josh Israel. Now, I think that we can look at Russian state TV, and we do have a story about that coming up. But I will repeat what I mentioned yesterday about the lack of education in the hinterlands, in the more rural areas. It is by design, okay? And there's a formidable block there as well as here, as we well know. And so these lies that just keep getting put out, I'm sure it was Will Rogers who stated, and I'm paraphrasing here, of course, is that, or was it Mark Twain? Regardless, a lie circles the globe so many times, 10, before the truth gets out of bed. I think it was Mark Twain. Or another anecdote is that a lie is on the front page and the retraction is on page A9. If you're lucky, it might even be on B12. Take your vitamin. Okay, we'll get into Josh Israel's offering here because it addresses another part of the big lie. It's just lie, lie, lie. Senate Republicans are falsely blaming rising gas prices following Russia's invasion of Ukraine on President Joe Biden. But while they are quick to point out that the current trend toward higher prices began before this crisis, they are silent on the fact that it started under former President Donald Trump. On Tuesday, Biden announced that the U.S. would halt all Russian oil imports. I don't know, it's a fraction of 1%, but hey, as part of a growing list of sanctions against Putin's regime. Now, the national average gasoline price, according to AAA, rose to more than $4.31 per gallon yesterday, Thursday, about 87 cents more than early February's rate. Now, Biden acknowledged that the Ukraine situation and the resulting diminished supply would mean higher fossil fuel prices in the short term. They're going to go up, he told reporters. Can't do much right now. Russia is responsible. And guess who's in cahoots with them? The Saudis. They want to Khashoggi some more journalists, and we won't let them, so they're not going to increase the supply, which would then bring down the price. Senate Republicans applauded Biden's embargo, but then scolded him for the resulting higher gas prices, because it's a win-win for them. Several pointed out that prices had been increasing in the previous months as well, asserting that Biden was responsible. Now this is a flat-out lie, Texas Ted Cruz said Biden's comment. Gas prices have increased 48% under Biden before Russia invaded Ukraine. Biden did that. And a bunch of other part of the insurgent caucus had their little peanut gallery offerings. So, for instance, Tommy Tuberville. Did you know that guy's annual salary when he was a football coach would have paid the salaries of almost 30 tenured professors every year? Just saying. Well, he pointed out that gas prices were lower before Trump lost the 2020 election. Every time POTUS makes a decision that's wrong, then he blames someone else for the results of that decision. November 2021, gas $3.42 per gallon. March 22, gas $4.25 per gallon. Well, Tuberville's numbers are slightly different from the monthly national retail gasoline price averages that are tracked by the U.S. Energy Information Administration, but close. Neither he nor his colleagues acknowledged that the prices actually began to increase months before Biden's landslide November 2020 presidential election victory against Trump. A gallon of gas cost on average $1.93 in April of 2020, when the economy was largely shut down due to the start of the pandemic. With people staying at home, demand was quite low. As the economy began to rebound, gasoline prices began to do the same. By the time Trump left the White House in January of 21, they were already back up to $2.42 per gallon. The gradual growth in demand and price continued as the economy blossomed under Biden. But fact checkers have debunked assertions by the repugs that the rise in oil prices is because of Biden's environmental policies. Now, fact checkers have widely debunked assertions that Biden's decisions to cancel the dangerous Keystone XL pipeline and pause new drilling projects on public lands were any significant factor in current prices. Indeed, the New York Times published a fact check titled "Republicans Wrongly Blame Biden for Rising Gas Prices," noting that the canceled Canadian tar sands pipeline project and the lack of new public drilling leases had made minimal price impact. Because once again, there's 9,000 unused leases. Drill those. You're sitting on them. And the Keystone XL pipeline did not bring any type of petrol or oil substance that we could turn into gasoline to drive our cars. It's sulfurated oil. It's the dregs. They're going to make plastics out of it. Last year, Biden asked Congress to pass a $555 billion in clean energy and climate change infrastructure investments as part of his Build Back Better agenda. The bill passed the House, but stalled in the Senate, with every single Republican opposing it. Had it become law, the move away from fossil fuel would already have begun by now, and that means we would not be, quote, dependent on foreign oil. Stephen Groves of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The South Dakota legislature passed a proposal to give state lawmakers more control over how federal funds are spent, defying Kristi Noem and clearing the way for the House and Senate to find agreement on a $5.8 billion state budget. The bipartisan proposal passed on the penultimate day of the legislative session with over two-thirds support in each chamber. It passed despite the Republican governor's ardent objections. She will next have an opportunity to veto the bill, but if the two-thirds support in both chambers holds, the legislature could override a veto. The Republican-controlled House has sparred with Noem over the authority to spend federal funds this year. During budget negotiations, those lawmakers gained support from the Republican-controlled Senate as well as Democrats, and the proposal emerged to require a legislative budget committee to approve state government spending of federal funds if it requires a policy change. of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The IRS said it plans to hire 10,000 new workers to help reduce a massive backlog that the government says will make this tax season the most challenging in history. I wonder who did that. The agency released a plan to work down the tens of millions of filings that include speeding up the traditionally slow hiring process, relying more on automated processes, and bringing on more contract workers to help with mailroom and paper processing. Getting it done will be the big challenge, tax experts say. The agency faces a backlog of around 20 million pieces of correspondence, which is more than 15 times as large as in a normal filing season. And the IRS workforce is the same size it was in 1970. Wow, some of us weren't even in high school then. Though the U.S. population has grown exponentially and the U.S. tax code has become increasingly complicated. Additionally, the need to administer pandemic-related programs has imposed an entirely new workload on the agency. White House officials have said the agency is not equipped to serve taxpayers even in non-pandemic years. Senior administration official said that said processing returns will continue to be a massive challenge so long as the agency operates on 1960s infrastructure, like the dial-up telephone. The IRS's latest plan to combat the current backlog includes creating a 700-person surge team to process new returns, adding 2,000 contract workers to respond to taxpayer questions about stimulus and child tax credit payments, and developing new automated voice and chat bots to answer taxpayer questions. Well, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, The Mighty Pen. There have been lots of adaptations of the French play Cyrano de Bergerac since its debut in 1897. Many of them, including the 80s vintage Roxanne, have focused on the comedy and downplayed the tragedy. However, in this latest musical adaptation by Joe Wright, there is no mistake that at its core, Cyrano is a tragedy about the loss of love, life, and most of all, opportunity. Filmed in the dazzling Italian Mediterranean, the story is that of the silver-tongued soldier Cyrano, played by Peter Dinklage, who has harbored a years-long crush on Roxanne, whom he had met earlier in their hometown. Roxanne, who sees Cyrano as her closest friend, has no idea of his love for her. She is aware, however, that she's the object of desire by an older duke, Ben Mendelsohn, and a dashing soldier from Cyrano's regiment named Christian. Roxanne is attracted to Christian, who has the looks, but not the words, to win Roxanne's heart. Cyrano, who feels that his dwarfism makes him unworthy, comes up with a solution. He'll write letters designed to capture Roxanne's heart, while Christian provides the visuals. As Cyrano puts it, the two of them will be the perfect man. This plan is as fraught as you might imagine, and the upset spurned Duke's involvement only adds to the complication. As it turns out, he is both Cyrano and Christian's military superior, and can command the two of them go to the front lines in a current conflict. Where one or both might not come back. A wonderful screenplay from Erica Schmidt from her 2018 stage adaptation, sharp directing from Wright, and a score by members of the band The National make this one a treat, worthy of more awards attention than it's gotten. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
1 in 6 Americans get sick from eating contaminated food each year. Contamination caused by salmonella is especially common. It's sometimes found in poultry, eggs, ground beef, pork, and even peanut butter. To reduce your risk from this and other foodborne germs, remember to clean, separate, cook, and chill. Clean your hands with soap and water. Separate raw meat, poultry, and seafood from other foods. Wash counters, cutting boards, and utensils before and after using them. Cook all food thoroughly and use a food thermometer to make sure food is cooked. Promptly chill meat, poultry, eggs, and other perishables. Finally, don't prepare food for others if you're sick, and be extra careful when you prepare food for children, pregnant women, the elderly, or people in poor health. To learn more about making food safer to eat, visit www.cdc.gov/vital signs.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. This week we introduce our series on democratic norms. We are joined by special guest Mina Bose, the Peter S. Calico Chair in Presidential Studies and Executive Dean for Public Policy and Public Service Programs at Hofstra University. Professor Bose, how is representative government a democratic norm?
Representative government is a fundamental feature of American democracy. When the framers drafted the Constitution, they designed a government that would be selected by the people to make decisions in the public interest. The framers believed that the public, which was a very restricted group of people at that time, but the view was that the public could make decisions on who should serve in office, but would not have the time, interest, or necessarily the knowledge to make decisions on what would be in the public good. Today, we have a much broader view of what the American public is. Representation, elected officials represent many more constituents than they did at the start of the American Republic. And the vote is much more open to all Americans. But we still expect that elected officials will have the responsibility of governing.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Bose. That's all for today's episode, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
The 2022 election returns are rolling in from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The city of Nashville has had a seat in the United States House of Representatives for as long as Tennessee has been a state, that is, for 147 years. But no longer. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee recently signed into law a new political map drawn up by his fellow Republicans in the state legislature. That map destroys Nashville's seat in Congress by splicing and dicing that city's voters into 3 adjoining rural conservative Republican districts. That newly gerrymandered map does 4 things. First, it destroys the congressional district's community of interest, which Nashville voters share with each other, but not with the rural voters. Second, it ensures that Nashville's voters will essentially be irrelevant in their new districts. Third, it eviscerates the voting power of black voters and guarantees their votes back of the bus status. And fourth, it guarantees that Democrats will lose and Republicans will win another seat in the House of Representatives. What's most disturbing is that what's happening in Tennessee and to Nashville is not the exception, but rather the rule, because the Supreme Court in 2019, 5-4, ruled that federal courts may not in any way remedy the democracy-killing manipulation of partisan gerrymandering. And so, now we witness democracy being destroyed, one gerrymandered district at a time. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. It was a tragic day of history repeating itself. An explosion occurred deep inside the Macbeth mine in Logan, West Virginia. In the immediate aftermath, the bodies of 2 miners were recovered. Rescue crews scrambled to locate and save the other trapped miners confined in the mine. But the explosion had occurred 2 miles from the mine's entrance, making rescue extremely difficult and dangerous. Newspapers from the region reporting on the rescue efforts painted a grim picture. The Eugene Register Guard painted a heartbreaking picture of stumbling rescue crews, so worn out they could only speak with difficulty of the terrors of the explosion in the deep pit. In all, 18 miners lost their lives on this date. For the miners and their families, the day was cruelly tragic. For just 6 months earlier, on September 2nd, an explosion had occurred at the very same mine, claiming the lives of 10 of their comrades. The September explosion was blamed on a spark from a cart hauling the coal. It ignited the dangerous gases that saturate the air in the mines. The company claimed the mine was safe and the methane gas problem had been solved. But the second explosion likely had the same cause. In West Virginia alone, there have been more than 90 recorded mine explosions, resulting in thousands of deaths since 1886. The worst disaster occurred in 1907, when an explosion at the Monongah mine killed 361 workers. In 2010, 29 miners tragically lost their lives in the Upper Big Branch coal mine. Mine workers have been some of the strongest and most vocal participants in the U.S. labor movement. Mine workers and their unions have continually fought and organized for safer working conditions and fair wages for this highly dangerous work. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 27 degrees Fahrenheit, but we're expecting a high of 70, so that's how people get the flu, huh? And it looks like we'll have sunny conditions throughout the day with winds light and variable, and mostly clear tonight with lows in the low 30s, winds remaining light and variable. Sunny tomorrow, early on Saturday, becoming mostly cloudy with showers developing later in the day with highs in the mid-60s. Winds will be out of the south-southwest at 10 to 20 miles per hour, bringing with it over a quarter inch of rain and more rain on Sunday and a lot next week. So we'll look forward to that. Confirmed cases of coronavirus continue to increase even though they want us to take our masks off. We have now increased to 422,078 confirmed cases. Deceased numbers remain the same at 494. Pollen is rated as none here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 25 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at level 3. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.37 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 74%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 51 degrees with rain. Paris is 52 and cloudy. Rome is 58 and fair. Kyiv is 30 degrees and mostly cloudy. Is it enough to keep the bomb runs from running? Kabul is 48 and mostly cloudy. They're over their bomb runs. Hong Kong is 64 and clear. Tokyo is 55 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 66 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 51 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And New York, New York is 50 degrees Fahrenheit and also sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Anonymous staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The mayor of a town in one of Mexico's most troubled states was shot dead yesterday, Thursday, near a soccer field, just weeks after the government sent the armed forces to restore order in the area. Federal authorities and officials in the western state of Michoacan condemned the killing of Cesar Arturo Valencia. Valencia Caballero, mayor of Aguililla, a municipality which Mexican media said had fallen under the control of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, otherwise known as the CJNG, before the army moved in last month. Valencia was shot 3 times while driving home from City Hall, authorities said, adding that forensics had found bullet shells at the scene. The Michoacan Attorney General's office said in a statement it was investigating the homicide. It did not name suspects and gave no further details. According to the U.S. government, the town is where CJNG leader Nemesio El Mucho Oseguera was born. Oseguera is among the most wanted men in Mexico's criminal underworld. The group is one of the most powerful gangs in the country, and for years has waged brutal turf wars with rivals for control of trafficking routes in Michoacan on the Pacific coast.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more anonymous staff at Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A far-right party will hold a share of power in Spain for the first time since the dictatorship of Francisco Franco, with the Vox Party securing a place in a coalition running the regional government in Castile and León. Alonso Fernandez Manueco, I'm mispronouncing that, the incoming regional president from the Conservative People's Party, otherwise known as the PP, announced the agreement on Twitter just before the new regional parliament was assembled for its first session. The PP won just over a third of the votes in an election in February, meaning it had to seek a coalition partner. Fernandez promised a stable and solid government with full respect for constitutional order, sure, and the region's autonomy statute. Vox regional leader Juan Garcia Gallardo called the coalition deal sensible, without winners or losers. He added in a Twitter message, "Let us all work together with a willingness for dialogue and agreement to achieve a legislature that benefits citizens," meaning only other Nazis, probably. Vox was launched in 2014 and now the third largest party in the national parliament, cutting into the PP's vote share. The PP is the country's leading opposition party and has traditionally alternated power with the currently ruling socialists, but seen its support eroded by corruption scandals. Indeed. Well, that brings us to an end to our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on. But we will meet up on Monday for River City Hash Monday, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.